Recently in India, we saw an explosion of anger among young people over the education system, specifically over the alleged leak of the NEET medical entrance examination. And they are rightly angry. Reports suggest that the examination papers were leaked and sold to the highest bidder, allowing money and connections to influence access to some of the most competitive medical seats in the country. But this is not just about NEET. India has witnessed a string of examination paper leaks over the years, and yet there are very little accountability for this repeated failure. What I'm going to show you today is another form of corruption in India's education system, one that is receiving far less public attention. In my view, it may be even more important and damaging because it reveals how ruling parties at the state level can shape expansion of private education and how ordinary citizens ultimately pay the price. This research uses comprehensive constituency level data from 2005 to 2016 to examine how local political alignment shapes the expansion of private education in India. They find that constituencies represented by MLAs from the state's ruling party experience significantly faster growth in private schools and private higher education institutions than constituencies represented by opposition politicians. But they do not find the same effect for government schools. Political alignment appears only to help expand private education, not public education. And here is the more troubling part. Despite the increase in the number of private schools, the researchers do not find any statistically significant improvement in learning outcomes. They examined reading and mathematics scores, as well as broader index of school quality that includes teachers, classroom, toilets, electricity, drinking water, libraries, computers, playgrounds, and other facilities. They find no meaningful improvement. So more private schools are being opened, but that doesn't necessarily mean better education is being provided. The main mechanism is political control over bureaucracy. Opening a private school requires an NOC, a no objection certificate, as well as several regulatory approvals related to construction, fire safety, sanitation, infrastructure, and affiliation. The application passes through several layers of education bureaucracy, including inspections by district officials and final approval from senior officials in the state education department. Now, politicians aligned with the ruling party are in much stronger position to influence these bureaucrats. Of course, the study does not directly observe private conversations or individual threats, but the authors show that the effect is particularly strong in states with high rates of premature police transfers. They use that as a proxy for political control over bureaucracy because politicians can reward compliant officials and punish uncooperative ones through transfers and postings. Now, in case you have not noticed, this is a clear abuse of regulatory power. Your ability to enter the education market may depend less on the quality of your institution and more on the political power behind you. The approval process, which is supposed to protect citizens from unsafe or substandard institutions, becomes an opportunity for rent-seeking political discretion and favoritism. Now, the second problem is a clear conflict of interest. Some of these politicians are themselves involved in the education business, either directly through their spouses, through educational trusts, or through close associates. The researchers divide MLAs according to their primary occupations and find that the private school growth effect is most pronounced among those connected to the education sector. Politicians are using their political influence to establish and expand educational institutions in which they themselves have an interest. The researchers also find that aligned MLAs report significantly higher liabilities while in office, suggesting increased borrowing during their terms. The pattern is clear. It suggests that political alignment may provide not only easier regulatory approval, but also better access to credit for educational ventures. Even when politicians do not own the institution themselves, private school owners may have strong incentives to seek political assistance. The paper argues that school owners can provide campaign financing, mobilize voters, or strengthen the MLA's local patronage network in exchange for help securing approvals. And perhaps the most important problem is the neglect of public education. The aligned politicians produce significant growth in private schools, but they produce no comparable growth in government schools. Even more troubling, the effect is concentrated in districts where the quality of existing government schools is already very low. Instead of repairing the public institutions serving India's poorest citizens, the political system facilitates private alternatives, particularly for families desperate to escape failing government schools. In other words, they're targeting the vulnerable. Instead of strengthening the schools that serve the citizens, the public schools, those who cannot afford the alternatives, politicians help establish fee-charging private schools for families who feel they have no choice but to pay. And what are the citizens receiving after paying for this private alternative? The researchers are finding no statistically significant improvement in reading or mathematics outcomes, and no improvement in their objective measures of school quality. This is what I would call a predatory form of privatization. This is not healthy market competition in which better private schools force government schools to improve. This is a politically captured market in which politicians use state power to expand private institutions. Sometimes institutions connected to their own interests, while the public system remains neglected. Citizens, especially those living in rural areas where government school quality is already low, are then pushed towards paying for private education that does not even produce better results. The politician benefits from political connections, possible campaign support, access to credit or direct ownership. The bureaucrats complies because the politicians can influence postings and transfers. They can punish them by transferring them to another district, and the private owner receives faster approval. What is left is the parent paying the bill. So tomorrow, when the government tells us that it has addressed the NEET leaks, that some perpetrators have been arrested and the problem has been contained, I want us to remember this research. This study points towards something more systematic: political favoritism and crony capitalism operating inside the education system itself. The most vulnerable Indian parents are being pushed to pay for private education because the public system has failed them, while the private alternative being politically promoted does not necessarily deliver better education. And the public system has not simply failed naturally, it has been neglected by the same political actors who benefit from the expansion of private alternatives. This is not educational reform. This is political monetization of educational failure. Thank you so much for your attention. I'll be back next time with another important idea on demographics data.